While I was setting the table on Thanksgiving, my dad filmed me and posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Look at this failure. He was always a servant." My siblings laughed. I got furious and left. The next day, my sister texted, "Why can't I withdraw $3,000 from your account?" That's when I finally snapped in. Picture this. I'm 30, a CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech company. But to my family, I was still their favorite punching bag. Last Thanksgiving, my father didn't just verbally humiliate me. He filmed me setting the dinner table, branding me a failure and a servant in a public post while my siblings jeered. That gut-wrenching betrayal was just the beginning. The next morning, a text from my sister demanding $3,000 from my account finally detonated 28 years of suppressed rage, changing everything forever. Let me tell you, for the longest time, our family was the picture of suburban perfection. Growing up in our upper-middle-class Connecticut neighborhood, we had the sprawling colonial, the manicured lawns, those cringeworthy Christmas card photos in matching sweaters. My dad, Richard, was the respected owner of a regional construction company. It all screamed American dream. But behind the perfectly closed doors, it was a different story. My father ran a strict hierarchy, and I was always at the bottom. Richard wasn't physically abusive, which, ironically, meant his emotional manipulation went unchallenged for decades. He used criticism like a surgeon's scalpel, precise, calculated, leaving wounds that never seemed to heal. "Wilson's just too sensitive," he declared to relatives whenever I dared react to his barbs. "He needs to toughen up if he's ever going to make something of himself." My mom, Marilyn, once a bright-eyed kindergarten teacher, had long since traded her dreams for a role as his chief enabler. "That's just how your father shows he cares," she'd whisper after a particularly brutal verbal lashing. "He pushes you because he wants you to succeed." Her nervous smiles and quick subject changes were the constant soundtrack of my childhood. My siblings learned fast, align with dad, and you were safe, you got privileges. Brandon, 2 years older, mimicked my father's dismissive attitude. He'd amplify jokes about my interest in computers, instead of, manly things like construction or football. The family disappointment, he'd call me, always making sure dad was within earshot to earn an approving chuckle. Heather, 3 years younger, mastered playing both sides. To my face, she'd sometimes offer a fleeting moment of sympathy. But the second dad walked in, she transformed. "Wilson's being dramatic again," she'd announce, instantly elevating her status by diminishing mine. What none of them seemed to grasp, or maybe what truly bothered them, was that despite the relentless belittling, I excelled. National Honor Society, valedictorian, a full scholarship to an Ivy League university for computer science. Each achievement was met with the same dismissive sneer from my father. "Let's see if you can actually do anything with that." After college, while Brandon followed dad into construction, only to struggle with basic project management, and Heather bounced between marketing jobs she quit when they got too stressful, I was building something real. I founded Trust Fund, a financial technology app designed to simplify investment for young professionals. 5 years of sleepless nights and reinvested profits grew that company to a $22 million valuation. Business journals called me an innovator, a rising star. My father? He called me lucky. It was the question everyone in my life eventually asked. "Why do you still go home for the holidays?" Natalie, my girlfriend, with her psychology background and warm brown eyes that saw straight through my defenses, asked it most often. We'd met at a tech conference 2 years prior, and her unwavering support had shown me what a healthy relationship actually looked like. "They're still my family," I'd say, but the justification felt increasingly hollow. The truth was more complicated. Part of me still craved their approval. Another part feared the final, explosive confrontation that setting real boundaries would bring. And maybe, the most painful truth was, I still held on to hope. Hope that they would change. Hope that one day, my father would look at me with genuine pride. Last Christmas, something inside me shifted. It was the turning point. After Dad spent the entire dinner gushing about how Brandon had really stepped up at the construction company, a company that was losing money for the 3rd straight year, mind you, he turned to me with a venomous smirk. "Too bad Wilson's little app thing doesn't generate any actual jobs for real Americans." That night, curled up with Natalie, I made myself a promise. This would be the last year I endured such treatment. With her arms around me, I finally verbalized what I'd known for years. I deserve better than this. Through months of sessions with Dr. Andrews, my therapist, I began to unpack the toxic patterns, preparing myself to finally set boundaries. You can't control how they respond, she warned, but you can control how you engage. As Thanksgiving approached, I felt a new resolve. I was ready to establish a new normal, one where I would no longer accept disrespect, even if it was packaged as family teasing. Little did I know, things were about to change far more dramatically than I could have ever imagined. Thanksgiving morning dawned with an unusual clarity. The crisp air and golden sunlight felt like a good omen as I drove the familiar route to my parents' colonial in Fairfield County. Natalie had offered to come, but I needed to face them alone this time. Call me if it gets too intense, she'd made me promise, kissing me goodbye. I arrived carrying a bottle of expensive Cabernet and a homemade pecan pie, Natalie's family recipe. A sense of optimism buoyed me. Today will be different. Today, I'll maintain my boundaries while still being present. Dr. Andrews and I had rehearsed scenarios, how to respond to passive-aggressive comments, when to disengage from provocations, ways to support my mom without enabling the dysfunction. My Aunt Patricia greeted me with a genuine hug. "Wilson, you look wonderful. I just read about your company in Business Weekly." Her husband, Uncle Gerald, shook my hand firmly. "Proud of you, son. Always knew you had it in you." Their warmth offered a momentary buffer as I stepped into the living room. The house smelled of roasting turkey and cinnamon. The dining room table was already set with my mother's heirloom china and crystal. The football game blared from the 70-inch TV, where Brandon, my father, and two of his brothers had staked their territory, beers in hand. "Wilson's here," my mother called out nervously from the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. My father barely glanced up, offering a curt nod before returning his attention to the game. "Need any help, Mom?" I asked, depositing my contributions on the counter. Her eyes lit up with relief. "Could you set the table?" Heather was supposed to, but she's upstairs on a work call. I noticed the strain in her expression. Dinner for 14 guests was clearly overwhelming her. "No problem," I said, genuinely happy to help. For the next 20 minutes, I meticulously arranged place settings. There was something meditative about aligning each fork and knife, folding napkins into fans, placing name cards exactly where relationships would be least strained, an art my mother had perfected over decades of family gatherings. I didn't even notice my father enter the dining room, his phone raised, until I heard his exaggerated stage whisper. "Look at this. 30 years old, and this is still all he's good for." Glancing up, I froze. He was recording me. Something about the calculated humiliation in his eyes made this different from his usual comments. "Dad, come on," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm just helping Mom." "That's Wilson," he narrated to his phone camera, his voice dripping with the mocking tone I knew too well. "Harvard education, and he's still most useful setting the table. Some things never change." The phone tracked my movements as I continued arranging silverware, my hands now slightly unsteady. Brandon appeared in the doorway, drawn by Dad's performance. "Getting good practice for your real calling, bro?" He snickered, playing to Dad's audience of one. I said nothing, focusing on completing the task, refusing to give them the reaction they craved. My mother briefly appeared in the doorway, took in the scene, and disappeared back into the kitchen without intervening. "What do you think? Should we show everyone what the big shot tech CEO really does at family functions?" My father's voice had that dangerous edge that always preceded his worst behavior. Before I could respond, he turned away, thumbs flying across his phone screen. The realization of what he was doing hit me just as Heather entered the room, her own phone in hand, a smirk forming. "Oh my God, Dad just posted that video of you on Facebook," she announced with undisguised glee. With the caption, "Look at this failure. He was always a servant." That's hilarious. The dining room seemed to tilt slightly. 13 place settings, perfectly arranged on crisp white linen, crystal glasses catching the afternoon sun, and my family circling like vultures over the carcass of my dignity. "Let me see that," I said, my voice unnaturally calm. Heather turned her screen toward me, showing my father's post already accumulating laughing reactions and comments like, "Some things never change," and "always the odd one out." The caption burned into my vision, Look at this failure. He was always a servant. 28 years of similar moments crashed over me like a wave. The elementary school science fair where my father loudly commented that my solar system model was obviously last minute, despite the weeks I'd spent on it. The high school graduation where he told relatives I got into Harvard, probably through some diversity initiative. The launch of my company, which he dismissed as playing around with computers. Delete it, I said, my voice steady but unfamiliar even to myself. Oh, lighten up, my father replied, re-entering the room. Everyone knows it's just a joke. He called toward the kitchen. Right, Marilyn? My mother appeared, anxiety etched across her features. Richard, maybe you should, he cut her off. Even your mother thinks you're overreacting. Brandon slapped my shoulder with false camaraderie. Can't take a little family teasing Harvard? Heather's phone chimed repeatedly. The Post is blowing up, she announced with apparent delight. Even Aunt Jennifer from Florida commented. That's when I noticed Uncle Gerald in the doorway, his expression clouded with disapproval, not directed at me, but at my father. Aunt Patricia stood behind him, whispering something that made him nod gravely. I carefully placed the last napkin I'd been holding onto the table, straightened it precisely, and looked directly at my father. Take it down, I repeated. Or what? He challenged, beer in hand. The television commentators providing an incongruously cheerful backdrop. Richard, my mother tried again. Dinner's almost ready. Let's not. The boy needs to learn to take a joke, Marilyn. This is why he can't handle the real business world. The irony of this statement, coming from a man whose construction company was failing while my little app thing had secured another round of venture capital funding just last month, might have been amusing in another context. Take it down, I said again, my voice dropping dangerously low. And I said, no. My father replied, stepping closer. What are you going to do about it, Mr. Bigshot Tech Genius? The breaking point wasn't dramatic. It was just the quiet certainty that nothing would ever change unless I changed it. I'm leaving, I said simply. Wilson, no. My mother's distress was palpable. Thanksgiving dinner is almost ready. The whole family's here. Let him go, my father scoffed. More turkey for the rest of us. Brandon laughed on cue. Heather glanced between us, momentarily uncertain which side offered the greater advantage. I walked out without another word, ignoring my mother's pleas and my father's derisive comments about my thin skin. The drive home passed in a blur of barely contained emotion. My phone buzzed repeatedly. My mother, then Natalie, who had somehow already heard, likely from one of my cousins who followed me on social media. That night, curled on my couch with Natalie's arms around me, I finally let the tears come. I think I'm done, I whispered. With what? She asked gently. Pretending we're a normal family. Pretending anything I do will ever be enough. She held me tighter. You don't need their approval to be worthy, Wilson. You never did. As I drifted into an exhausted sleep, I had no idea that the true breaking point was still ahead. That Thanksgiving dinner was merely the appetizer for what would come the next morning. The morning after Thanksgiving, I woke to Natalie bringing coffee to my bedside before heading to her shift at the psychology clinic. Take it easy today, she advised, kissing my forehead. Self-care only. Following her suggestion, I ignored the accumulating texts from family members and spent the morning in my home office reviewing quarterly projections for trust fund. Work had always been my sanctuary, the place where effort correlated directly with results, where my worth wasn't predetermined by family dynamics, but built through competence and innovation. Just before noon, my phone pinged with a text that broke through my carefully constructed calm. It was from Heather. Why can't I withdraw $3,000 from your account? The system keeps declining. I stared at the message, initially assuming it was sent to the wrong person. Then came another. Hello, I need that money today. The transfer from your checking account isn't working. My fingers flew across the screen. What are you talking about? You don't have access to any of my accounts. 3 dots appeared as she typed her response. Dad set it up ages ago. I've used it before when you were traveling. Don't be difficult. A cold realization washed over me. Last year, when launching Trust Fund's new investment platform, I'd opened several accounts with First National to test the interface. My father had insisted on coming along to provide advice. I now recalled him speaking privately with the bank manager, a former golf buddy, while I was signing documents. Hands shaking, I logged into my online banking portal. There it was, an auxiliary access authorization. I'd never noticed it, granting limited withdrawal privileges to Richard Martin, Heather Martin, and Brandon Martin. The timestamp showed it had been added the same day I opened the accounts. Previous unexplained fluctuations in that particular checking account suddenly made terrifying sense. Small withdrawals I'd attributed to forgotten subscriptions or fees had actually been my family helping themselves to my money. A call to the bank confirmed my suspicions. Yes, Mr. Martin. Those authorizations were added at account creation. Your father presented a signed authorization form. Would you like us to send you a copy? The forged signature on the document they emailed looked convincing enough. Clearly, my father had practiced. My throat tightened with the magnitude of this violation as I immediately froze all accounts and initiated the process of creating new ones with enhanced security. My phone rang, Heather again. I let it go to voicemail, only to have it immediately ring with Brandon's number. What the hell, Wilson? He demanded when I finally answered. Heather needs that money for her car payment. Why is that my problem? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Because you're family and you have more than enough? He spluttered. It's just $3,000. You probably make that in an hour with your tech garbage. Have you been taking money too? I asked directly. His hesitation told me everything. Look, sometimes Dad transfers a little to help me out between projects. It's not a big deal. It's theft, Brandon. Forgery and theft. Don't be so dramatic. Dad said you'd never even notice, and you obviously didn't until now. The casual admission stunned me. How long has this been happening? Brandon's voice took on its familiar, condescending tone. What difference does it make? You've got millions. We're just talking about family helping family. Before I could respond, I heard my father's voice in the background. Is that him? Let me talk to him. My father didn't bother with greetings. Wilson, fix whatever you did to the accounts. Heather needs that money today. You forged my signature and have been stealing from me, I stated flatly. Don't use words like stealing about family helping family, he countered, echoing Brandon's phrasing. So that was their practice justification. And it wasn't forgery. You were right there in the bank. I'm calling the police, I said, the words surprising even me. Don't be ridiculous, my father scoffed, though I detected the first note of uncertainty in his voice. You'd embarrass the entire family over a misunderstanding. This is exactly why you've always been the problem child. No sense of loyalty. Loyalty? The word triggered something primal in me. Loyalty? You publicly humiliated me yesterday. You've been stealing from me for over a year, and now you're lecturing me about loyalty? That video was a joke. Everyone got a good laugh. Why are you always so sensitive? That's when I exploded. Not with the shouting rage my father might have expected, but with a cold, clear fury that had been building for decades. I'm closing those accounts today. I'm creating new ones you will never access. If any of you contact my bank again, I will press charges for attempted fraud. This ends now. You ungrateful, my father began. But I cut him off. I've earned everything I have despite you. Not because of you. The only failure in this family is your inability to see anyone's value unless they're reflecting glory back on you. I hung up before he could respond. My heart hammered so violently I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Within moments, my phone exploded with texts and calls. My father, Brandon, Heather, even my mother, all demanding explanations or attempting to minimize what had happened. Amidst the digital chaos, I called the two people I knew would provide clarity. First, Marcus, my best friend since college, and the only person besides Natalie who truly understood my family dynamics. They did what? Marcus exclaimed when I explained. Wilson, that's straight-up criminal. You need to report this. I know, I said, but they're still my family. Family doesn't steal from you, then gaslight you about it, he countered. What did Natalie say? Haven't told her yet. She's with patients until 6. Call your lawyer, Marcus advised. At minimum, get everything documented while the evidence is fresh. My next call was to Trevor, my business partner and trust fund CFO. We need to review all company accounts immediately, I told him, and implement the enhanced security protocols we discussed last quarter. Trevor, ever efficient, asked no personal questions. I'll start right away. Should we be concerned about broader unauthorized access? I don't think so, but let's verify everything. And Trevor, let's keep this between us for now. By late afternoon, I'd spoken with my bank's fraud department, consulted with Mr. Peterson from legal, and implemented a comprehensive security overhaul of both personal and business finances. The methodical tasks provided a temporary distraction from the emotional devastation beneath them. When Natalie arrived that evening, she found me sitting in darkness, staring at nothing. "Your family," she said simply after I'd explained everything. It wasn't a question, but a diagnosis. "My family," I agreed. "What are you going to do?" I took her hand, drawing strength from its warmth. "I don't know yet, but something has to change permanently." What neither of us realized was how dramatically that change would come, or how completely the confrontation would expose decades of family secrets I'd never suspected. The weekend following Thanksgiving unfolded like a psychological thriller. By Saturday morning, I had secured my financial accounts, changed all passwords, and implemented two-factor authentication on everything from my email to my Netflix account. The sense of violation had kept me awake most of the night, my mind cataloging every interaction with my family through this new, chilling lens of betrayal. My phone had become a battlefield. The family group chat exploded with messages ranging from self-righteous indignation, my father, to tearful manipulation, my mother, to outright threats, Brandon. Heather oscillated between angry demands and attempts at guilting me, her financial desperation becoming increasingly evident. "You've always been selfish," my father wrote. "This just proves what we've always known about you. Please, Wilson, your sister really needs that money," my mother pleaded. "Can't you find it in your heart to help family?" Brandon's approach was more direct. "You'll regret making enemies of us. Family knows where all the bodies are buried." I muted the conversation without responding, which only escalated their attempts through direct messages, emails, and eventually calls to my work number. Trevor reported that my father had even called our investor relations line, though he refused to tell me what was said. By Sunday, the conflict had spilled onto social media. Heather posted a thinly veiled attack about privileged tech bros who forget where they came from, which several extended family members liked. My father shared an article about narcissism in the digital generation with pointed comments about ungrateful children. What they didn't expect, however, was the quiet support that began flowing in from unexpected quarters. Uncle Gerald, my father's younger brother, called me directly. "I saw what Richard did at Thanksgiving, Wilson. That video was completely inappropriate," he said, his voice grave. "And between us, I've suspected for years that your father has been less than forthcoming about financial matters." Aunt Patricia followed with a supportive text. "You've always been the strong one, Wilson. Don't let them twist this around." Even more surprising was the email from my cousin Jennifer. "They did the same thing to me 3 years ago when I got my inheritance from Grandma. Stay strong." The most shocking development came late Sunday afternoon when the doorman called to announce Brandon was in the lobby, demanding to be let up. Natalie, who had been staying with me through the weekend, looked alarmed. "Do you want me to ask him to leave?" she offered. After a moment's consideration, I shook my head. "No, let's hear what he has to say." Brandon arrived at my door with none of his usual swagger. His face was haggard, his typically immaculate appearance disheveled. Without waiting for an invitation, he pushed past me into the apartment. "You need to fix this," he demanded, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "Dad is losing it. He's threatening to disown you. That would require him to own something of value first." I replied evenly, earning a sharp look from my brother. "This isn't a joke, Wilson. The family is falling apart." "The family was already broken, Brandon. This just exposed it." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of our father, it momentarily disoriented me. "Look, maybe Dad shouldn't have set up those account permissions without telling you. I get that you're upset." "Upset?" I echoed. "Brandon, he committed fraud. You and Heather have been taking my money without permission. That goes well beyond upset." "It wasn't like that," he insisted, though his eyes couldn't meet mine. "Dad said you had agreed to help the family financially, that you wanted to support us, but didn't want to deal with the requests directly." The realization that my father had lied not only to me, but about me, hit hard. "And you believe that? After the way he's always talked about me?" Brandon sank onto my couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "You don't understand what it's like working for him, Wilson. Every day it's hell. Nothing is ever good enough. The company is bleeding money, but he refuses to change anything." For the first time, I saw my brother not as my tormentor, but as another victim of my father's manipulation, albeit one who had made different choices than I had. Why does Heather need $3,000 so urgently? I asked, changing tack. Brandon's laugh was bitter. She maxed out her credit cards, trying to keep up with Dad's expectations. The fancy car, the luxury apartment, it's all smoke and mirrors. She's drowning in debt, but terrified to let him know. And you? He wouldn't meet my eyes. Construction management doesn't pay what it used to. And Dad, he takes most of what I make back into the company. The picture forming was both disturbing and clarifying. My father had created a family system of financial dependency, while simultaneously fostering competition and resentment, keeping us all too busy fighting each other to recognize his role as puppet master. Our conversation was interrupted by a call from my mother, which Brandon immediately answered on speakerphone. Brandon, thank God you're with Wilson. Your father is talking about driving there himself. He's been drinking, and tell him not to come. Brandon interrupted sharply. I'm handling it. You don't understand. My mother's voice had the tight quality it acquired when she was trying not to cry. He's saying terrible things, Brandon, about all of us, but especially about Wilson. I've never seen him like this. What kind of things? I asked, leaning toward the phone. My mother's surprise at hearing my voice was evident. Wilson. Oh, sweetheart, please just give your sister the money she needs. Your father is saying he'll reveal things about your past that you wouldn't want public. Something about a problem in college. I don't know what he means, but he's calling people. Ice formed in my veins. My father was threatening to fabricate stories that could damage my reputation and, by extension, my company. The casual cruelty of it, the willingness to potentially destroy what I'd built simply to maintain control, left me speechless. Brandon ended the call with reassurances that he would fix things, then turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What's he talking about, Wilson? What happened in college? Nothing happened, I said firmly. But truth has never been a requirement for Dad's narratives, has it? The rest of the evening passed in intense discussion. Brandon revealed more about our family's financial reality than I had known. How our father's construction company had been struggling for years, how he'd remortgaged the family home twice, how much of the lifestyle they presented was financed through debt and, apparently, dipping into my accounts. I'm not giving Heather the $3,000, I said finally as Brandon prepared to leave. Not because I don't want to help her, but because it wouldn't actually help. It would just perpetuate the cycle. Then you'd better prepare for nuclear war, Brandon warned. Dad won't let this go. After he left, Natalie held me in silence for a long time. I'm proud of you, she finally whispered. This can't have been easy. It's not over, I replied, staring at my phone as notifications continued to accumulate. I think it's just beginning. I was right. Monday morning brought an email from Trevor marked urgent. Call me immediately. Your father contacted 3 of our major investors over the weekend. The family crisis had officially spilled into my professional life, threatening everything I'd built. Whatever remaining hesitation I felt about taking definitive action evaporated in that moment. This wasn't just about standing up for myself anymore. It was about protecting my company, my employees, and my future from the chaos of my past. Monday evening brought the confrontation I'd been both dreading and anticipating. My mother called, her voice carrying that particular strain that indicated my father was listening nearby. We need to have a family meeting, Wilson. Tonight. Everyone will be at the house at 7. I'm not coming, I replied simply. Please, she whispered, and I could hear the fear beneath her plea. Your father says if you don't come, he'll take steps. What kind of steps, Mom? Legal steps. About the money he says you owe the family. The absurdity might have been laughable if it weren't so painful. I don't owe the family anything. He's the one who committed fraud. Wilson, please. Her voice dropped even lower. I'm afraid of what will happen if you don't come. Those words, the first acknowledgement she'd ever made of fearing my father, broke through my resolve. Fine, but I'm bringing Natalie. Your father says this is family only. Then I'm not coming. A muffled conversation on her end. Then, all right. 7 o'clock. Natalie insisted on driving, correctly assessing that my emotional state made me an unsafe driver. Remember what Dr. Andrews said. She reminded me as we approached my childhood home. You can leave at any point. You don't owe them an audience. The scene that greeted us was clearly orchestrated for maximum pressure. Not just my immediate family, but Aunt Patricia and Uncle Gerald, 2 cousins, and even my father's business partner, Harold, were arranged in the living room like jurors at a trial. My mother's red-rimmed eyes and nervous movements told me she'd been crying recently. Wilson, my father acknowledged coldly from his position in his leather armchair, the family throne. And his friend, fiancé, I corrected automatically, though Natalie and I weren't officially engaged. The word just felt right in that moment, drawing a small smile from her and a scowl from my father. Sit down, he commanded. When we remained standing, his face darkened. This is still my house, and you'll respect that. Why am I here, Dad? I asked, deliberately using the familiar term to remind everyone present of the supposed family bonds being invoked. You know why, he snapped. Your behavior is unacceptable. You've embarrassed the family, distressed your mother, and left your sister in a financial crisis. I laughed, a short, incredulous sound. My behavior is unacceptable? You posted a humiliating video of me online, forged my signature, stole from my accounts, and then threatened me when I stopped the theft. Nobody stole anything, he insisted. Family finances have always been communal in this household. Not my finances, I countered. Not the money I earned building a company you constantly belittled. Heather stepped forward then, her expression a practiced mask of contrition. Wilson, I didn't know Dad hadn't told you about the account access. I thought you knew and were okay with it. The transparent lie hung in the air between us. Before I could respond, Brandon unexpectedly spoke up. That's not true, Heather, he said quietly. Dad told us both that Wilson wouldn't notice the withdrawals. He said Wilson had so much money he'd never even check those accounts. My father's face flushed with anger. Brandon, I'm tired of the lies, my brother continued, not meeting our father's glare. Wilson's right. What we did was wrong. The room fell silent. This unexpected crack in the united front seemed to throw my father off his carefully planned script. He recovered quickly. Fine. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding about the accounts. That doesn't excuse Wilson's refusal to help family in need. My mother stepped in, her voice pleading. Wilson, sweetheart, we're just asking you to help your sister this one time. $3,000 means nothing to you, but it would make such a difference for her. It's not about the money, Mom. I tried to explain. It's about the pattern. Dad humiliates me, then expects me to finance the family. Heather participates in the humiliation, then asks for money. Where does it end? Family doesn't keep score, my father declared pompously. Really? I retorted. You've been keeping score my entire life. Every perceived failure, every decision that didn't align with your vision, every achievement you couldn't take credit for, all tallied and held against me. Aunt Patricia, who had been silent until now, suddenly stood. He's right, Richard. You've always treated Wilson differently. We've all seen it for years. My father's face contorted with fury. Stay out of this, Patricia. This doesn't concern you. It concerns all of us when you gather the family to ambush your son, she replied evenly. Especially when you've been misleading everyone about your financial situation. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father's business partner, Harold, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What is she talking about, Richard? My mother asked, her voice small. My father ignored her, focusing his rage on me. This is your doing, isn't it? Turning my own family against me with your lies. I haven't said anything, I replied truthfully. But maybe it's time someone did. Uncle Gerald stood to join his wife. The construction company is nearly bankrupt, Marilyn. Richard has been borrowing against the house to keep it afloat. That's why he's been so desperate for access to Wilson's money. My mother's face drained of color. Richard, is this true? You said business was just having a temporary setback. 3 mortgages isn't temporary, Gerald continued grimly. And from what I understand, there are tax issues as well. My father surged to his feet. That's enough. All of you get out of my house right now. It's not just your house, my mother said, her voice stronger than I'd heard in years, and I think I have a right to know if we're about to lose it. The facade was crumbling rapidly now. Harold, looking deeply uncomfortable, stood to leave. I think this is a private family matter, Richard. We'll discuss the situation at the office tomorrow. There's nothing to discuss, my father insisted, though the desperate edge in his voice betrayed him. Everything is under control. As Harold departed, the remaining family members looked at each other with new awareness. The carefully constructed narrative of Martin family success and harmony lay in ruins around us. Heather broke the silence, her voice small. Dad, You promised the $3,000 would be my last loan. You said the company was turning around. It will, he insisted. Once Wilson stops being selfish and invests in the family business like he should have years ago. And there it was, the real purpose of this family meeting. Not reconciliation, but a last-ditch attempt to access my resources. The realization crystallized something in me. I'm not giving you money, I said, addressing the entire room. Not $3,000, not $30,000, not $3 million. Not now, not ever. After everything we've done for you, my father exploded. We raised you, educated you. I earned a full scholarship to both high school and college, I interrupted. I built my company without a penny from you. The only thing you ever gave me was criticism and emotional abuse. Abuse? He scoffed. Now you sound like one of those soft millennials who need safe spaces. Richard, my mother warned, her expression hardening. I took Natalie's hand, drawing strength from her presence. I'm done. Done with the manipulation. Done with the gaslighting. Done with pretending we're a normal family with normal disagreements. What exactly does that mean? My father demanded. It means I'm cutting ties completely. I won't be returning for Christmas, birthdays, or any other family gatherings. I won't be taking calls or responding to messages. And I definitely won't be providing financial support. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother began to cry softly. Brandon stared at the floor. Heather looked shell-shocked. My father's face transformed into something ugly and unfamiliar. You ungrateful little, he started, advancing toward me. Uncle Gerald stepped between us. That's enough, Richard. Get out of my way, my father snarled. I want him out of this house. I'm already going, I said calmly. Mom, if you ever need help getting away from him, call me. The offer won't extend to financial support for him or his business, but it will always be there for you. Don't you dare try to turn my wife against me, my father growled. I'll destroy you, Wilson. I'll tell everyone what you really are. And what am I, Dad? I asked quietly. A fraud, a coward, a failure hiding behind computer code because you could never cut it in the real world. The words should have hurt, but somehow they didn't. They sounded petty and small, coming from a man whose life was collapsing around him. Goodbye, Dad, I said simply, turning to leave with Natalie. If you walk out that door, don't ever think about coming back, he shouted after us. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the tableau. Of my broken family. That's the plan. As we drove away, Natalie kept glancing at me with concern. Are you okay? To my surprise, I realized I was. I think I'm better than I've been in years. The next day, I met with Mr. Peterson to ensure legal protection against any potential actions my father might take. I contacted Dr. Andrews to schedule additional sessions to process the seismic shift in my life, and I called Trevor to explain the situation and develop a strategy to reassure any investors my father might have contacted. I should have done this years ago, I told Natalie that night as we sat on my balcony watching the city lights. You weren't ready before, she said wisely. Healing happens on its own timeline. As painful as the break had been, I felt lighter than I had in decades. The long shadow my father had cast over my life was finally receding, allowing me to step fully into the light of who I could become without his constant criticism echoing in my mind. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Decades of conditioning don't disappear overnight. But for the first time, I was facing the future, unburdened by the weight of seeking approval I would never receive. 3 weeks after the explosive family meeting, I was deep in year-end planning with Trevor when my assistant interrupted with an unexpected message. Harold Lancaster is here to see you. Without an appointment. My father's business partner was the last person I expected to see in my downtown office. Send him in, I said, curiosity overriding caution. Harold entered looking considerably less polished than usual. The confident construction executive had been replaced by a man who appeared not to have slept properly in days. Wilson, he began awkwardly. Thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you, Harold? I kept my tone neutral, gesturing for him to take a seat across from my desk. He declined the seat, instead pacing near the window overlooking the city. This is difficult. I've known your father for 27 years. We started the company together, though he bought out my partnership stake 15 years ago. I remember, I said, though the buyout was news to me. I've stayed on as operations director out of loyalty, but things have deteriorated significantly in recent years. He turned to face me directly. Your father has made some questionable decisions. That seems to be his specialty, I replied dryly. I'm not talking about personal matters, Harold clarified. I'm talking about business practices that could potentially cross legal lines. My full attention engaged immediately. What kind of practices? Harold hesitated, conflict evident in his expression. Material substitutions on government contracts, undocumented workers, irregular accounting that suggests possible tax creativity. Are you saying my father is committing fraud? I'm saying I'm uncomfortable with certain aspects of how the business is being run, Harold replied carefully. And after witnessing his behavior at your parents' house that night, I'm concerned about his stability. Why come to me? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Because despite everything, he's still your father. And because if these issues come to light through official channels, the consequences could be severe. I studied Harold, assessing his motivations. Are you asking me to help cover this up? No, he said firmly. I'm giving you the opportunity to address it within the family before it potentially becomes a criminal matter. The irony was almost painful. After a lifetime of being called a failure by my father, I was now being asked to save him from his own failings. I appreciate you coming to me, I said finally. But I think you should be having this conversation with my father, not me. I've tried, Harold admitted. He refuses to acknowledge there's a problem. Claims it's just temporary measures until the company recovers. I sighed. The weight of family obligation battled with my recent resolution to cut ties. I'll need to think about this. After Harold left, I called Marcus for perspective. What would you do if you discovered your estranged father might be committing business fraud? Theoretically, Marcus considered, I'd get very clear documentation to protect myself from any blowback, then make an anonymous tip to the relevant authorities. And if he was your father? Same answer. Family doesn't mean enabling criminal behavior. That evening, Natalie and I discussed the situation over dinner. You don't owe him protection, she reminded me. But whatever you decide, make sure it's for the right reasons. Not revenge, not obligation, but what aligns with your values. The next morning brought another unexpected visitor, Heather. My assistant's voice carried surprise as she announced my sister's arrival. Unlike Harold, Heather looked better than she had at the family confrontation. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her makeup was minimal, and for the first time in years, she looked like the sister I remembered from childhood, before our father's influence had fully shaped her. Hi, she said tentatively, hovering in the doorway. Can we talk? Depends what about. I replied, gesturing to the visitor's chair. She sat, hands twisting nervously in her lap. I wanted to apologize. For everything. The video, the money, all of it. I was wrong. The simple admission surprised me. What changed? Everything, she said with a hollow laugh. After you left that night, Mom started asking questions about the family finances. Turns out Dad has remortgaged the house 3 times without telling her. They're underwater on everything. The house, the cars, even his life insurance policy has loans against it. And how does this relate to your apology? Her eyes met mine directly. Because I realized I've been playing the same game as Dad, projecting success while drowning in debt. Taking your money was wrong, but so was pretending I had my life together when I was falling apart. For the first time in years, I saw my sister clearly, not as an antagonist, but as another casualty of our father's toxic influence. What are you going to do now? I asked. I quit my marketing job, the one I hated but kept because it impressed Dad. I'm moving to a cheaper apartment next month, and I'm seeing a therapist. She gave a self-deprecating smile. Turns out I have approval-seeking behavior stemming from paternal emotional manipulation. Sound familiar? Despite everything, I found myself smiling vaguely. I don't expect you to forgive me, she continued. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. What Dad's been doing to all of us. How he pitted us against each other. Before I could respond, my phone chimed with a text from Brandon. Did you know about the tax audit? Dad's freaking out. The pieces clicked into place. Harold's warnings. My father's desperate need for money. The increasing instability. It wasn't just bad business decisions, but potential legal jeopardy. Heather, what do you know about Dad's business practices? Her expression clouded. Not details, but I overheard him and Harold arguing last week about documentation and material certification. Dad said he did what he had to do to keep things afloat. I showed her Harold's business card. Did he come to see you too? No, she said, looking confused. Why would he? The selective approach confirmed my suspicions that Harold was primarily concerned with protecting himself, not some noble desire to help my father. Over the next few days, the situation accelerated. My mother called, sounding exhausted. Your father isn't sleeping. The IRS has requested additional documentation for the past 3 tax years. He won't tell me what's happening, but I found him shredding papers at 3 in the morning. Brandon texted that our father had asked to temporarily add him as a signatory on all his accounts, a request Brandon had wisely refused after our recent experiences. Then came the call I'd been half expecting. My father himself, his voice lacking its usual bluster. Wilson, no greeting, no preamble. I need to speak with you in person. About what? Business matters. Private business matters. Is this about the IRS audit or the questionable contracting practices? His sharp intake of breath confirmed both. Who have you been talking to? Does it matter? The truth seems to be finding its way out regardless. I need your help, he admitted, the words clearly causing him physical pain. Just temporary assistance to get through this situation. What kind of assistance? Financial and perhaps strategic. The request hung between us. The man who had spent decades belittling me now asking for my expertise and money to save him from his own actions. No, I said simply. No? Just like that? After everything I've done for you. That's exactly why, Dad. After everything you've done to me, and apparently to your business partners, clients, and the federal government, I'm not getting involved. You would let your own father face potential criminal charges. His voice rose with familiar indignation. What kind of son are you? The kind who learned from watching you that actions have consequences. I'll tell everyone it was your idea, he threatened desperately. That you advised me on tax strategy. No one would believe that. I replied calmly. Especially since I have recordings of our conversations about my business, where you repeatedly dismissed my computer games as not being real work. The silence that followed told me he was recalibrating, searching for another angle of attack or manipulation. Your mother will suffer if this goes badly, he tried finally. I've already spoken with her, I countered. She knows she has a place to stay if needed, and I've connected her with a separate financial advisor. His final plea surprised me with its raw honesty. I don't know how to fix this, Wilson. For a moment, I glimpsed the frightened man behind the bullying facade. Someone who had spent decades building a house of cards that was now collapsing. Then you should hire an attorney specializing in tax law, I advised, not unkindly, and stop destroying evidence. That only makes things worse. So that's it. No help from my Silicon Valley success story. The familiar sarcasm, even in his moment of vulnerability, confirmed I'd made the right decision. That's it, Dad. Good luck. In the weeks that followed, I maintained my boundaries while monitoring the situation from a distance. I didn't report my father to authorities, not out of family loyalty, but because his actions were already under scrutiny, making my involvement unnecessary. Instead, I focused on rebuilding connections with those family members who demonstrated a genuine desire for healthier relationships. My mother began weekly therapy sessions and consulted with a divorce attorney, though she hadn't yet decided whether to proceed. Brandon maintained cautious contact, still navigating his complicated loyalty to our father, but making efforts to establish his own identity. Heather committed most fully to change. After moving to a modest apartment and finding a job at a nonprofit she actually enjoyed, she joined a support group for adult children of narcissists. Our relationship, while still healing, had found a new foundation in mutual respect rather than competition. When the business media eventually reported that Martin Construction was under investigation for contractual irregularities and possible tax discrepancies, I declined all requests for comment. My father had created this situation through his own choices. He would face the consequences without my intervention. Some might have called it revenge to let him fail so publicly without assistance. I saw it differently. For the first time, my father was experiencing life without the safety net of manipulation and control, facing the natural results of his actions rather than shifting blame to others. The true turning point wasn't his downfall, but my liberation from needing either his approval or his punishment. The empire he'd built through intimidation and shortcuts was crumbling. But I wasn't watching with satisfaction or gloating. I was simply living my own life, focused on building something genuine and sustainable. Do you ever miss them? Natalie asked one evening as we planned a vacation, our first Thanksgiving away together. The family holidays, I mean. I miss what they could have been, I admitted, but not what they actually were. She smiled, understanding exactly what I meant. Then let's create new traditions worth missing if we ever have to skip them. As the year drew to a close, my father's legal troubles continued to mount, but they no longer defined my days or disturbed my peace. I had discovered the most powerful response to his lifetime of control wasn't confrontation or revenge. It was creating a life so full and authentic that his influence became irrelevant. 1 year after that Thanksgiving video incident, I stood in the kitchen of our new lakeside cabin, watching Natalie arrange flowers on the dining table, while Marcus and his wife Rachel argued good-naturedly about the proper way to carve a turkey. Through the window, I could see Trevor and his husband David playing fetch with their golden retriever by the water's edge. The scene radiated warmth, laughter, and genuine connection. Everything Thanksgiving should be, but never had been in my childhood home. "Penny, for your thoughts," said a voice beside me. My mother, looking years younger than she had last Thanksgiving, handed me a glass of wine. "Just thinking about how much can change in a year," I replied, accepting the glass with a smile. Indeed, the transformations had been profound. My mother had finally filed for divorce after 34 years of marriage, a decision catalyzed by the discovery of my father's financial deceptions, but ultimately rooted in her growing recognition of the emotional abuse she'd endured and enabled. The 3-bedroom condo she now owned outright, thanks to my insistence on including it in the divorce settlement, had become a peaceful sanctuary where she was rediscovering interests abandoned decades ago. "Have you heard from him recently?" I asked, not needing to specify who he was. She shook her head. "Not since the plea agreement. Heather visited him last week, though. My father had ultimately avoided prison by accepting a plea deal for tax evasion and contract fraud, 5 years of probation, significant financial penalties, and the permanent loss of government contracting privileges. Martin Construction had been dissolved, its assets sold to cover debts. At 63, Richard Martin was working as a consultant for a former competitor, his empire and influence reduced to memory. "How was he?" I asked, not out of concern, but mild curiosity. "Bitter," my mother said simply, still blaming everyone but himself. Some things never changed, a truth I had finally accepted about my father. The man who had dominated my childhood with criticism and manipulation would likely never acknowledge the damage he'd caused or seek genuine reconciliation. That acceptance had been the final step in my healing journey, understanding that I couldn't change him, only my response to him. Heather arrived then, carrying a homemade pumpkin cheesecake and accompanied by her new boyfriend, Kyle, a soft-spoken high school history teacher who treated her with the respect she'd finally recognized she deserved. After 9 months of therapy and debt counseling, my sister had emerged as someone I genuinely enjoyed spending time with. Thoughtful, self-aware, and capable of the emotional authenticity our father had always discouraged. "Brandon sends his regrets," she told me, setting down her dessert. "He's still trying to figure out where he stands with everything." Our brother remained the family member most torn by conflicting loyalties. While he had maintained limited contact with me and reconnected with our mother, he still worked alongside our father at the consulting firm, trapped in patterns of seeking approval he'd never fully receive. His journey would be his own, in his own time. As we gathered around the table, family by blood and by choice intermingled, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the painful awakening that had led to this moment. Dr. Andrews had helped me understand that sometimes the greatest growth comes from our deepest wounds, a perspective that had transformed how I viewed the previous year's events. "Before we eat," I said, raising my glass, "I want to thank everyone for being here. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined a holiday filled with so much genuine love and acceptance. Each of you has played a part in helping me understand what real family means." Natalie squeezed my hand under the table, her engagement ring catching the light. Our wedding was planned for spring, a new beginning symbolizing everything we'd built together. To chosen family, Marcus proposed, lifting his glass. And to boundaries, my mother added with a knowing smile that spoke volumes about her own healing journey. After dinner, as conversations flowed around me, I stepped outside onto the deck overlooking the lake. The autumn air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke, the water reflecting a perfect mirror of stars above. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad. Just 2 weeks earlier, Such a message might have triggered anxiety or anger. Now, I simply acknowledged it as information, neither responding nor deleting it. The power those two words once held over me had dissipated like morning mist over the lake. The healing hadn't come through confrontation or revenge, though both had played their parts in the journey. It had come through building something new, relationships based on mutual respect, professional success rooted in innovation rather than approval-seeking, and most importantly, an internal compass that no longer swung wildly with my father's opinions. I had learned that standing up for yourself isn't a single dramatic moment, but a daily practice of small choices. That family legacy is not just what we inherit, but what we choose to carry forward. That forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. Sometimes it simply means releasing the expectation that the past could have been different. The foundation I'd established to support young entrepreneurs from difficult family backgrounds had become my way of transforming pain into purpose. Each quarter, we funded 10 promising startups while providing mentorship and psychological resources to help these young innovators navigate success without the baggage that had nearly derailed me. Natalie joined me on the deck, wrapping her arms around my waist from behind. "Everyone's asking for you. Dessert time." "Just getting some air," I said, turning to embrace her properly. "Everything okay?" I nodded, truly meaning it. "Better than okay. I was just thinking about how sometimes the things that hurt us most lead us exactly where we need to be." "Philosopher Wilson," she teased gently. "Save some wisdom for your mints." Inside, the warmth and laughter called us back. These were the people who had stood beside me through the darkness, who had reminded me of my worth when I'd forgotten it, who loved me not for what I could provide, but simply for who I was. As I rejoined the gathering, I realized the most profound lesson of the past year. True strength isn't found in dominating others or building facades of success. It's found in the courage to be authentic, to set boundaries, and to create connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or fear. The family table I'd once dreaded had been replaced by one where everyone present chose to be there, where disagreements were handled with respect rather than manipulation, where vulnerability was met with support rather than exploitation. It wasn't perfect. Nothing human ever is. But it was real in a way the elaborate performances of my childhood never had been. Later that evening, as our friends and chosen family prepared to leave, my mother pulled me aside. "I need to apologize," she said, her eyes clear and direct in a way they rarely had been during my childhood. "I should have protected you. I should have spoken up years ago." "You're speaking up now," I replied, embracing her. "That's what matters." As the cabin emptied and quiet descended, Natalie and I sat before the fireplace, contemplating the year behind and the future ahead. "Do you think you'll ever fully reconcile with your father?" she asked thoughtfully. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I've reconciled with his place in my story. He shaped me, but he doesn't define me. And that's enough." In the dancing flames, I could see the reflection of the journey, from a child desperate for approval to a man comfortable in his own worth. The video that had sparked this transformation was long deleted from Facebook, but its gift remained, the catalyst for breaking cycles of toxicity that might otherwise have continued for another generation. If this story resonated with you, remember, family dynamics shape us, but they need not imprison us. The table you were born to isn't necessarily the table where you belong. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is create a new definition of family, one built on respect, authenticity, and unconditional love.